Hey, my name is Emily, and before we dive in, I want to ask, where are you watching from today? Drop your country and city in the comments below. I read every single one. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, the kind of paper stock that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. My name was not on it. I stood in my kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, still in my robe, holding my morning coffee, staring at the invitation that had been slipped through my mail slot sometime before dawn. The return address was a wedding venue, Hartwell Estate, up in the mountains, 40 minutes from my house. The date was 6 weeks away, my son's wedding date. I turned the envelope over, checked the front again, addressed to my neighbor, Patricia Hollis, who had apparently signed for a stack of them by mistake and brought the whole bundle to me that morning, apologetic and confused. Every name on every envelope was someone I knew, my sister, my brother, my oldest friends, my son's childhood best friend, Dominic, every name except mine. I set down my coffee cup before I dropped it because I had written the check. I had written multiple checks, actually, a total of $41,300 across 7 separate payments, all going into the account of one Brianna Celeste Morwood, soon to be Brianna Celeste Walsh, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had just uninvited me from the wedding I had paid for. Let me back up. I know how this sounds. I know there are two sides to everything, and I am the kind of woman who genuinely tries to hold both sides at once. I have spent 63 years on this earth trying to be fair, trying to be measured, trying not to be the kind of mother-in-law who becomes a cautionary tale. I failed, apparently, or at least that was what Brianna decided. My name is Emily Walsh. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I moved to Asheville when I was in my late 30s after my divorce. I'm a retired occupational therapist. I spent 30 years helping people relearn how to button their shirts after strokes, how to hold a pencil after accidents, how to move through a world that had suddenly become difficult to navigate. I like to think that work made me patient. It made me observant, too, good at watching people, reading them, understanding what they needed even when they couldn't say it. I have one son. His name is Connor. He's 34 years old, and he is the single best thing I have ever done with my life. Not because he's perfect, but because he is genuinely good. He coaches youth soccer on weekends. He calls me every Sunday without being asked. He still remembers that my favorite flower is a yellow freesia, and he brings me a bunch every time he visits. He met Brianna Morwood 3 years ago at a craft distillery event in downtown Asheville. She works in marketing, specifically in brand development for luxury goods companies. She is 31, beautiful in a very deliberate way, always put together, always strategic about her image, the kind of woman who would describe herself as curated. I don't mean that cruelly. It's just true. Everything about Brianna is intentional. When Connor first brought her home, I made pot roast. I lit candles. I put out the good napkins. I was nervous in the way that any mother is nervous when she meets the woman her son is in love with, because you want it to go well. You want to like her. You want her to like you. You understand in that moment that this woman has the potential to either expand your family or quietly reduce it. The evening went fine. Brianna was polite. She complimented my house. She ate everything on her plate and called it really lovely. But there was something behind her eyes that was hard to read, not hostile exactly, but assessing, like she was cataloging everything. The house, the neighborhood, the art on my walls, the books on my shelves, taking inventory. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that a lot over the next 2.5 years. Connor proposed to Brianna on Valentine's Day 14 months ago. He called me that night, giddy in a way I hadn't heard from him since he was a teenager who'd just been told he made the varsity team. He said, "Mom." She said, "Yes, Mom." And he kept repeating it like he was trying to make it real. I cried. Happy tears, the real kind. Brianna's parents live in Phoenix, Arizona. Her father, Gerald Morwood, is a semi-retired commercial real estate developer. Her mother, Daphne, used to run a catering company. They are comfortable people, pleasant at a distance, the kind of couple who communicate primarily through group texts with excessive emoji. Gerald told Connor early on that he was thrilled for them both and that he would absolutely contribute to the wedding costs. What Gerald meant by contribute, it turned out, was $5,000, sent once in a lump sum with a cheerful note about how it would help with flowers or whatever. The wedding Brianna had in mind was not a $5,000 wedding. It was not a $20,000 wedding either. Brianna had a Pinterest board. I know this because she showed it to me herself during a Sunday dinner, sliding her phone across the table with the energy of someone presenting a business proposal. The board had over 400 pins. She wanted Hartwell Estate, which is a restored 19th century manor on 30 acres outside Asheville. She wanted 200 guests. She wanted a live string quartet during the ceremony and a 12-piece band for the reception. She wanted a custom floral installation, an archway of white peonies and eucalyptus that a florist in Charleston had quoted her at $8,000 just for the arch. Connor makes a decent living as a civil engineer, but he is not Hartwell Estate money, not yet. He came to me quietly one evening in early spring. We sat on my porch, the kind of spring evening in Asheville where the mountains turn that particular shade of blue that almost doesn't look real, and he said, "Mom, I don't want you to feel pressured. I really don't. But Brianna and I were wondering if—" I stopped him. "How much?" I said. He looked at the mountains. "I don't have a number yet. Give me a ballpark." He rubbed the back of his neck. "The venue alone is $18,000 for the day." I looked at my son's face. He loved her. He was not a man who asked for things easily. He had paid his own way through college on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs, and asking me for money cost him something. I could see it. "Let me think about it," I said. I thought about it for one night. I had savings, not a fortune, but I had been careful for decades, and after I sold the house in Knoxville when I moved, I'd invested wisely. I could do this. It would be a significant gift, but I could do this. What I could not do was hand $40,000 to a 29-year-old I didn't fully know yet and have no conversation about it at all. So I sat down with Connor and Brianna together at my kitchen table. I made tea. Brianna sat across from me with her planner open and her reading glasses on, the stylish rectangular frames she'd gotten from some boutique in Atlanta, and I told them that I wanted to help. Brianna looked up from her planner. For one moment, genuinely, her face softened. She said, "Emily, that is so incredibly generous." And she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I meant it when I squeezed back. I really did believe in that moment that we were going to be okay. The first payment went to Hartwell Estate, $18,000, a cashier's check, made out to the venue and handed directly to the event coordinator, a professional and efficient woman named Sylvia Okafor, who had been managing weddings at the estate for 11 years. Sylvia sent me a formal receipt and a thank you card with a small Hartwell Estate crest on it. I kept the receipt. I kept all of them. This is the occupational therapist in me. Maybe I document things. I have always documented things. I keep a small expandable file folder in my desk drawer for anything financial, and I add to it the way other people add to scrapbooks. Every receipt, every confirmation email, printed and filed. I mention this because it matters later. The second payment was to the catering company, $6,000 as a deposit. The third was to the florist, $4,000. Then the photographer, then the string quartet, then the rental company for the specialty chairs Brianna had found, these antique-style gold Chiavari chairs that she loved and that cost an almost offensive amount to rent per piece for one day. Over about 5 months, I had paid $41,300. Not once did I make a secret of it. Not once did I make a production of it either. I didn't bring it up at family dinners. I didn't expect a shrine built in my honor. But I did expect to be treated like a person who mattered to the planning, because when you contribute significantly to something, being shut out of it is a specific kind of dismissal. The first sign that something was shifting came in October. Brianna had been handling most of the planning herself with her maid of honor, a woman named Sienna, who was her college roommate and who had the particular quality of someone who agrees with absolutely everything the person next to them says. I had asked gently and only twice whether I could come along to any vendor meetings just to see the venue, just to be part of the experience. Both times, Brianna said, "Oh, of course, we'll figure out a time." No time was ever figured out. In October, Connor mentioned casually that they'd done a final walkthrough at Hartwell Estate. I said, "Oh, how did it look?" with genuine excitement, and he got a look on his face, just for a fraction of a second, like he'd said something he wasn't supposed to. "Beautiful," he said. "Really beautiful." I let it go. I let it go twice more after that. The second beat came in November, about 8 weeks before the wedding. Brianna called me. Not a text, an actual phone call, which was notable because Brianna communicated primarily through text and the occasional voice memo when something needed to be explained in detail. Her voice on the phone was warm and careful, the way a customer service representative's voice is warm and careful when they are about to tell you something you won't like. "Emily," she said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the wedding, and I really want it to feel intimate and personal, And I've been talking to my therapist about some of the family dynamics going into this, and I think I need to talk to you about the seating situation." I was sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot. I remember there was a shopping cart slowly drifting across the asphalt in my rearview mirror. "Okay," I said, "we're doing assigned tables, and Connor and I talked about it, and okay, I'm just going to say it. We think it might be better if you sat with the extended family rather than at the head table. I know that might feel weird, but the head table is going to be really small, just immediate parents and the wedding party, and Sienna's parents are going to be there, and my parents, and Brianna," I said. "I'm Connor's mother. I know." She said it like I'd agreed with her. "I know, and that's why this was so hard to decide, but we really feel like it's for the best. And you'll still have a wonderful time, I promise. We're putting you with your sister and her husband and some of Connor's college friends, so it'll be fun." I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes after we hung up. I am not a dramatic person. I don't catastrophize, but I sat there in my car with the November cold fogging up the windows, and I felt something very quietly close in my chest. Not quite anger, something older and quieter than anger, something like the beginning of understanding. I still told myself I might be overreacting. I called my sister Lorraine that night. Lorraine is 67, a retired school teacher, and she has never in her life told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was available. It's one of the things I love most about her. I told her about the call. There was a long silence. "Emily," Lorraine said, "that girl is pushing you to the edge of the frame." That's a very specific way to put it. I taught middle school for 31 years. I know exactly what it looks like when someone starts making another person disappear. I thought about that phrase all night. Pushing you to the edge of the frame. And hey, if you haven't already, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from right now? I love seeing where Emily's stories reach around the world. December came, 5 weeks before the wedding. I had not told Connor about the phone call. I know some people will judge me for that. Why not just go to your son? And the answer is complicated in the way that all mother-son dynamics are complicated, especially when there's a new partner in the picture. Connor was happy. He was genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I hadn't seen since he was small. I didn't want to be the stone in his shoe. I didn't want him to feel like he was being asked to choose sides before he'd even walked down the aisle. So I waited. I watched. I brought Brianna a small potted orchid when I came for Sunday dinner, and she thanked me with the warmth of someone thanking a postal worker for delivering a package on time. The moment that broke the waiting came on a Tuesday. Sienna, Brianna's maid of honor, called me by accident. I'm almost certain it was an accident, though I have thought about it many times since. My number is saved in Brianna's phone as Emily W. I know this because I saw it once when Brianna's screen lit up on the kitchen counter. Sienna apparently meant to call someone else, maybe a different E in her contacts, and reached me instead. She answered before I could say anything. "I know, but Brianna is serious about it," Sienna was saying, her voice close like she was walking and talking. "She doesn't want Emily at the wedding at all. Like, not at all. She told me last week." There was a muffled response from whoever else was on the line. "Because of the whole money thing," Sienna continued. "She says Emily uses the money as leverage, that she acts like she owns the wedding because she paid for it. Brianna says she walks in with this energy like she's the one getting married." Another muffle. "Oh, she absolutely means it. She told Connor last night, and he's going along with it. He said he'd handle the invitation. A pause. I know, it's brutal, but you know Brianna. Then there was a fumbling sound and a sharp, "Oh, shoot," and the call disconnected. I sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then I went to my expandable file folder. I took out every receipt, every confirmation, every printed email. I laid them on my kitchen table in chronological order like I was assembling a case file. Because I was. I thought about what Sienna had said, that I acted like I owned the wedding because I paid for it, that I walked in with a certain energy. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Brianna over the past year. Had I been overbearing? Had I inserted myself where I wasn't wanted? Had I made comments about flower choices or table settings or anything that could reasonably be interpreted as controlling? I genuinely could not find a moment that fit that description. Not one. What I found instead, when I looked at it honestly, was a woman who had asked twice to attend a vendor meeting and been brushed off. A woman who had been moved from the head table. A woman whose calls were increasingly brief, whose texts were increasingly clipped, who had been gently, systematically reduced in importance to the people around her. What I found was someone who had been paying for something she was being erased from. The wedding invitation, or rather, the absence of one, arrived 3 days later. Well, it didn't arrive, which is the point. Patricia, my neighbor, knocked on my door at 8 in the morning with a thick bundle of cream envelopes and an apologetic smile. She said the postman had given her a whole stack that were meant for different addresses on our street, and she'd sorted them out, but this one, she held up a single envelope. Had my address on the back, but Patricia's name on the front. She'd opened it thinking it was hers. She realized the mistake when she saw the invitation inside was for Connor Walsh and Brianna Morwood's wedding. She knew Connor was my son. She came immediately. She was embarrassed. She kept apologizing. I told her it wasn't her fault and thanked her and closed the door. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the invitation she'd handed me, not mine, but hers, and I counted. I went through the entire bundle Patricia had brought. My sister's name, my brother, Dennis's name, my friend Carol, who I've known for 20 years, Dominic, Connor's best friend since they were 11 years old, my cousin Ruth, who had driven down from Virginia specifically for a bridal shower we'd thrown Brianna in September, all invited. I opened every envelope Patricia had already opened by mistake. She'd been trying to sort them, and had opened several before realizing they weren't hers, bless her heart. None of them were addressed to me. I was not on the guest list. I was not having a moment of paranoia or misunderstanding. The evidence was sitting on my kitchen table in a neat stack of cream-colored envelopes. My son was getting married in 6 weeks at a venue I had paid for, with a caterer I had paid for, beneath a floral arch I had paid $8,000 for, and I had not been invited. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that. I didn't cry. I think I had been moving toward this moment slowly enough that when it finally arrived, I didn't have tears. What I had was a kind of cold, clarifying stillness, the kind that settles over you when you finally stop hoping you're wrong and start accepting that you're right. I called Lorraine. The invitation didn't come, I said, a beat of silence. Emily, I'm not on the list. Another silence, longer this time. Then Lorraine said very quietly, "Oh, that girl has made a mistake." "I know," I said. "I know she has." I waited 24 hours before I did anything. This was intentional. I have learned in 63 years that most of the decisions you make in the first 24 hours of a crisis are decisions you later wish you'd made differently. Anger is a terrible architect. It builds fast, and it builds crooked. So I waited. I made soup. I walked for 2 hours along the river trail behind my neighborhood with my earbuds in, listening to nothing, just letting my thoughts settle. When 24 hours had passed, I called Connor. Not Brianna. Connor. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mom." His voice was careful. He knew. "Connor," I said, "did you know that I wasn't invited to your wedding?" A long, awful pause. "Mom, just yes or no, sweetheart. I'm not angry yet. I just need to know if you knew." Yeah, I knew. Brianna felt that it was complicated, Mom. She felt like there was a lot of tension, and her therapist recommended that your mother not be invited to your wedding. It's not She didn't phrase it like that. It was more about Connor. I said his name the way I only say it when I need him to stop talking and really hear me. He went quiet. Did you know when you asked me for money? Did you know you were going to do this? No, he said immediately. I swear to you, Mom, no, this came up later. I believed him. Painfully, I believed him. Because Connor doesn't lie to me, he avoids difficult conversations, he lets things drift, he takes the path of least resistance with the person who pushes hardest, which has always been his greatest flaw. But he doesn't lie to my face. I need you to come over, I said. Today, please. Another pause. Brianna. Connor, I am asking you to come to my house and have a conversation with me. If you choose not to, that is a choice you will be making. I want to be very clear that it is a choice. He came that afternoon. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Brianna had spread her planner, where I'd made tea, where I'd told them I wanted to help, and he looked like he hadn't slept well in a week, which probably meant he hadn't. I put the file folder on the table between us. I want to tell you something about Connor before I get to what happened next, because it's important. My son is not a bad person. He is a conflict-averse person, which is a different thing. He spent years watching his father and me have a marriage that was, at its worst, a cold war conducted through pointed silences and careful distance. Our divorce, when it came, was almost a relief for all three of us, including Connor. I think that experience taught him that conflict means loss. That friction means the whole structure falling apart. So he smooths, he accommodates, he takes the shape of whoever's container he's currently in. With Brianna, who is forceful and certain and always has a reason for everything she wants, he had become very smooth indeed. But sitting across from me at my kitchen table, looking at the file folder, he was also a 34-year-old man who understood, somewhere underneath all the smoothness, what was right. I opened the folder. I didn't make a speech. I didn't cry. I laid out the receipts one at a time, in order like a hand of cards. Hartwell Estate, catering, florals, photography, the string quartet, the Chiavari chair rental, the final miscellaneous payment for the ceremony officiants, travel and accommodation, which Brianna had asked me to cover 2 months ago as an afterthought. $41,300, all receipts, all in my name or Connor's name, never Brianna's alone, all with paper trails clear enough that a first-year accountant could follow them. Connor looked at the paper trail for a long moment. Mom, he said, I know what this looks like. I'm not making accusations, I said. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not saying Brianna spent my money and now I'm entitled to attendance at a wedding. That's not the argument I'm making. He looked up. The argument I'm making, I said, is about vendors' contracts and the fact that most of these vendors don't know who they're actually working for. I let that sit for a moment. When I paid the Hartwell estate, I paid by cashier's check, and I have a receipt from the estate coordinator, Sylvia Okafor, with my name on it as the paying party. The florist's contract, which Brianna asked me to sign on her behalf, do you remember that? She said she was out of town for the initial contract signing, has my signature on it. Connor's expression was doing something complicated. The catering deposit is in my name. Brianna told me it needed to be because she hadn't opened a joint account with you yet. She may not have realized or she may not have thought about it, but the paper trail for this wedding runs almost entirely through me. What are you saying, Mom? I folded my hands on the table. I'm saying that I have called Sylvia Okafor at Hartwell Estate. I'm saying I've reviewed the terms of each vendor contract. And I'm saying that as the party of record on most of these agreements, I have certain standing that Brianna may not have fully considered when she made her decision. Connor stared at me. I haven't done anything yet, I said. I want to be very clear about that, too. I have not made any calls. I have not sent any emails. I have not taken any action. I am sitting in my kitchen talking to my son. I reached across the table and put my hand on top of his. I don't want to blow up your wedding, sweetheart. That is the last thing I want. I want to walk you down that aisle. I want to see your face when she comes through the door. I want to dance with you and cry the good kind of tears and watch you start your life. That is all I have ever wanted. His jaw was working. He was holding something back. Emotion, I think, mostly. But I need you to understand, I said, that if I am not welcome at this wedding, then I need to think very carefully about what my continued financial involvement in it means. Not out of spite, out of dignity. I need to tell you something funny that happened in the middle of all this because I promised you a moment of warmth, and this is it. While Connor and I were sitting at the table in the middle of this very heavy conversation, my caddie, a 15-year-old orange tabby named Persimmon, jumped up onto the table and sat directly on top of the file folder. Connor and I both stared at him. Persimmon looked at Connor, looked at me, began very deliberately grooming his tail. Connor let out this sound, half laugh, half sob, and said, "Persimmon, this is not the time." Persimmon continued grooming. And for just one moment in the middle of everything terrible, we both just laughed, really laughed. The kind of laughter that comes out of you when there's nowhere else for the emotion to go. I scratched Persimmon behind the ears. Connor rubbed his eyes. "I love you, Mom," he said. Just like that, plain and simple. "I know you do," I said. "I love you too. Now we have to figure this out." Connor left my house at 7 that evening. He did not tell me what he was going to do. He said he needed to talk to Brianna. I told him I understood, and I meant it. I also told him I needed an answer within 48 hours, because that was the reasonable timeline. He called me the next morning at 9 o'clock. "Brianna wants to talk to you," he said. "Can you come over?" I drove to their apartment, a nice place in the River Arts district with exposed brick and big windows overlooking the French Broad River. Brianna was in the kitchen when I arrived, still in her weekend clothes, and she had the look of someone who had done an enormous amount of thinking, and none of it had gone the way she hoped. She had clearly not anticipated the contracts. I could see it in the careful way she was holding herself, like someone walking across ice. She offered me coffee. I said yes. We sat. "Emily," she said, "I owe you an apology." She wasn't wrong, and I waited. "I want to be honest with you. I haven't always been completely honest with myself about what's been happening between us." She paused. Her coffee cup was in both hands. "I told myself a story about you, that you were controlling, that you were using the money to insert yourself, that you made me feel like the wedding was yours and not mine, and I used that story to justify something that I know when I really look at it was not okay." I said nothing. I am a good listener. 30 years of occupational therapy will do that. "The truth is," she said more quietly, "I'm terrified of not being enough for Connor, for this family, I grew up with parents who were always very focused on what things looked like from the outside. My mother hosted events for 20 years, and every event was about the image. And when I started planning this wedding, it became this whole thing in my head about it being perfect. And I think I saw you as a threat to the perfect picture I had in my head because you knew Connor before me, because he loves you so much, because you're so," she stopped. "Capable," she said finally, like she'd found the right word after searching for a moment. "You're just very capable," and that made me feel small. This was more honesty than I had expected. It recalibrated something in me. I set down my own coffee cup. "Brianna, I don't want your wedding. I want my son. There's a difference." She looked at her hands. "I also want to know my daughter-in-law," I said. "Not a curated version of her, the real one. The one who apparently has fears and blind spots and a therapist she talks to." I almost smiled. "That one. That's the one worth knowing." She looked up. "But I need you to understand," I said, "that what you did, the not inviting me, the not telling me, the just quietly removing me from the list like I was a name you could pencil out, that hurt me very much. And it can't be undone by a conversation. It can only be made right by what comes after." She nodded slowly. "So this is what I need," I said. "I need to be at my son's wedding. I need a seat that reflects my role in his life, not one that hides me. I don't need the spotlight. I don't need a speech or a production. I just need to be present as his mother in the room where it happens." "Okay," Brianna said. "Just that? Okay." The wedding was on January the 17th. Hartwell Estate in January is something, I don't know if you've ever been to the Blue Ridge Mountains in winter, but the cold there is clean and sharp, and the estate that morning was draped in low mist coming off the hills, and the old stone manor was lit up warm against all that gray-white sky. Sylvia Okafor's team had lined the stone path with small lanterns, and the peonies on the arch, My $8,000 arch were so white they almost glowed. I wore a navy dress with a wrap of deep burgundy that Lorraine helped me choose. My hair was up. I wore my mother's pearl earrings, the small ones, because I wanted to carry her with me. I was in the third row, left side aisle seat. Not because I insisted on proximity, because Connor came to me the week before and said, "Mom, you're sitting where you can see my face." He'd moved his college friends to a different table and put me with Lorraine and Dennis, and he'd asked the wedding coordinator to reserve me an aisle seat specifically. When Brianna came through the doors of the estate's main hall, I watched her. She was genuinely beautiful. White silk, clean lines, no excess, just her. And she was nervous in the realest way, her eyes bright and a little glassy, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. And when she saw Connor at the end of the aisle, her face did something that no amount of curation or image management could produce. It went completely, utterly unguarded. She just loved him, simply, right there in front of everyone. I cried, the good kind. At the reception, Brianna's father, Gerald, gave a toast. It was pleasant and briefly funny and a little generic. Then Sienna gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Then Connor stood up, without it being scheduled, without anyone expecting it, and tapped his glass. He talked about Brianna for a while, and then he talked about what it means to become a family and what it means to carry the people who made you into the future you're building. And then he said, looking right at me, "My mother taught me that love is not a feeling you wait to have. It's a practice. You show up for it even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He raised his glass to me, just me. Lorraine grabbed my hand under the table. I didn't trust myself to do anything except nod, but he saw it. Later in the evening, after dinner and the first dance and the 12-piece band that was absolutely unreasonably good, Brianna found me by the edge of the dance floor. I was watching Connor dance with his old friend Dominic to something completely ridiculous and joyful, and I was laughing, and she came and stood next to me. We watched them together for a moment. "I want to be honest with you about something," she said, not looking at me, eyes on Connor. "I spent months building a case against you in my head, collecting evidence for why you were the problem. And I know, that I did it because it was easier than being scared." "Of what?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Of not being the most important woman in his life." I looked at her. She was still watching Connor. "You already are," I said. "You became that the night he called me to say you'd said yes and he couldn't stop saying it." She turned to look at me then, and her eyes were bright. She didn't say anything. "I'm not your competition," I said. "I never was. I was just here, and I'd like to keep being here. If that's something you can let happen." She nodded, pressed her lips together. "I think I'd like to let that happen." It wasn't a movie moment. She didn't hug me dramatically and sob. She just nodded and looked back at Connor, and we stood there together watching him be ridiculous on the dance floor, and it felt like something real beginning. Not perfect, not complete, just beginning now. Here is where I need to tell you what I did and didn't do, because people always ask. I did not call the vendors. I was never going to call the vendors. That was never the plan. What I did was let Brianna believe for about 36 hours that I might. I let the existence of those contracts and those receipts sit in the room between her and Connor like a quiet, unavoidable fact. I did not threaten anyone. I did not make demands. I simply made my position clear, that I had standing, that I had documentation, and that my continued goodwill toward the financial arrangements was connected to my ability to attend as Connor's mother. Was it leverage? Technically, yes. Do I feel bad about it? Honestly, no. Because $41,000 is a significant act of love, and love should not be used as a weapon, but it also should not be pocketed and ignored. I was not trying to buy my way into the wedding. I was trying to prevent a quiet erasure that would have hurt everyone, including Brianna, in the long run. The contracts were real. My name was genuinely on them. I made sure of that, not because I anticipated needing them as leverage, but because I am an organized person who documents things. The leverage was accidental, or maybe not entirely accidental. Maybe some part of me, the part that had been watching carefully for a long time, knew that documentation was a form of protection. I also want to be clear. I gave Brianna and Connor the money as a gift. I was never going to try to get it back. I was never going to pursue legal action or create financial chaos. That was never on the table. What was on the table was a conversation about dignity, about what it means to accept someone's generosity and then write them out of the story. The vendors all did beautiful work, by the way. The florist's arch was extraordinary. The caterer's beef tenderloin was the best thing I've eaten in years. The string quartet played during the ceremony, and I felt it in my chest. $41,300 well spent. In the months after the wedding, things were different. Not transformed overnight. That's not how people work, but different. Brianna started texting me independently, not just when Connor was around or when it was logistically necessary. Small things at first. A photo of a restaurant she thought I'd like, a question about whether I knew a good tailor in Asheville, a funny video of a dog that reminded her of something I'd said once. In February, she called me on a Thursday evening, which was not a Sunday, which was not our usual rhythm. She said she was having a hard week and didn't really want to get into the details, but wanted to talk to someone who would just listen. I listened. We talked for almost an hour about nothing specific, about everything, the way you do when you're actually comfortable with someone. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with the lamp on and Persimmon asleep on the chair across from me, and I thought about how strange and complicated and ultimately movable people are, how we build walls for reasons that make sense to us from the inside, and then someone just stays present, stays patient, stays on the outside of the wall long enough that eventually the wall seems unnecessary. Brianna is not easy. She is driven and particular, and sometimes she communicates in ways that are more efficient than warm. But she loves my son genuinely, and she is capable of honesty when she stops being afraid, and that is more than enough to work with. Connor still calls me on Sundays. He still brings yellow freesias. And now sometimes Brianna comes with him. In April, about 3 months after the wedding, I got a card in the mail. Cream-colored envelope, which made me laugh, given the associations. My name was on the front in Brianna's handwriting, which I recognized from the seating chart she'd once shown me. Inside was a card, just a simple card, a botanical illustration on the front, no occasion. In her precise architectural handwriting, it said, "Emily, I found your receipts in the wedding folder last week when I was organizing things. $41,000 is a number I keep coming back to, not because of what it represents financially, but because of what it would have meant to lose access to it, and how I almost made you disappear from the day you helped make possible. I don't fully understand yet what a good mother-in-law looks like. I didn't have a template for it, but I think you might be one. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Brianna, I read it 3 times. Then I put it in my expandable file folder, not with the receipts, in a different section, the one in the back, where I keep the things that matter most. People ask me sometimes, friends, my sister, people at my book club who've heard pieces of this story, they ask, "Emily, was it worth it? All the money, the heartache, the almost missing the whole thing?" And I think about that arch of white peonies. I think about Connor's face when I gave him a cashier's check and told him to go build his life. I think about a Saturday evening in January when the mountains were blue-gray and the lanterns were lit, and I was sitting in the 3rd row aisle seat watching my son get married. I think about Brianna's face going unguarded. Here is what I know at 63. Having raised a son alone and worked alongside people in their hardest moments and made my share of mistakes along the way. Generosity is not a transaction, but it is also not a blank check, not financially and not emotionally. You can give freely and still insist that your giving be received with grace. You can be kind without being invisible. You can love your children's partners honestly, imperfections and all, without pretending those imperfections don't exist. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the people who push hardest against you are the ones who, underneath all that pushing, are most desperate to trust you. I didn't win anything the day I sat at my kitchen table with that file folder. What I did was refuse to disappear quietly. And as it turns out, that was the right thing for everyone, including Brianna, especially Brianna. We're still figuring it out, the 3 of us. I expect we'll be figuring it out for a long time. That's okay. Good things usually take a long time.